Right, guys. Thank you for joining for today's session. We have special guest today. His name is Eric. Eric is a software engineer, and today Eric is working at Microsoft. But he used to be a personal trainer less than 3 years ago, right? And what is the most exciting part is that he is a completely self-taught. He doesn't have any engineering degree, and he didn't go to any coding bootcamp. Hey, Eric, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And please, as I always ask our guests, please tell us about yourself. Like, what did you do before your software engineering?
Yeah, definitely. So first thing first, I do want to clarify, I do not have any degree at all. You mentioned like I completely don't have any engineering degree, but also including that I don't have any degree at all as well. And yeah, so a little more about myself. My name is Eric, and I'm currently a software engineer at Microsoft. And also I have a YouTube channel as well. I'm a YouTuber. Yeah, so basically my journey to become a software engineer started like you mentioned late 2018.
Perfect. Can you tell us about your experience? How did you get your first job? Like where your journey began before you got your first job?
So the way how I got my first job, I basically, like I mentioned, I started it late 2018. At that time, I was a personal trainer and also I was going to school. So basically, I went to a couple universities for a couple semesters. At that time, I really wanted to go into health science, actually, because at that time, I wanted to be a personal trainer. I wanted to get into healthcare and stuff. But the thing about healthcare is that to be like a doctor or a pharmacist, you really need to, go for a long time, right? For schooling, for example, for being a doctor, you had to go for 10 years, like 4 years of pre-med, 4 years of medical school, and 2 years of residential experience. And for pharmacists in Canada, for BC, you probably take about like 2 years of 60 credits before you enter in the pharmaceutical science school. And then I also feel like, it was really risky at that time because, the admission ratio for getting into, medical school is very risky. And there's not a lot of school options in Canada because, each province has only one medical school. So I find that this path was a little risky. So I thought about, I reconsidered my options and I came across with CS or computer science. But the thing is that I didn't take any CS classes in high school. So I kind of wanted to explore, but I also don't want to spend a lot of money on school. So that's why I kind of wanted to learn something on my own and try to experience this to see if this is something for me, right? So like you mentioned, I didn't waste too much money on education. But I do learn a lot from online resources as well. So to answer your question, how did I learn software engineering? I would say mostly just online learning, talk to a lot of people and building projects and get experience. So that's basically how I got my software engineering job. And to answer another question, like you mentioned, like how did I get my first job? So I basically started learning a lot of like easy programming language that are most popular, like JavaScript. I learned about front-end development, learned about back-end development, building a project using full stack development skills like React, Express, Node.js. At that time, I didn't really know anything about cloud or static language or algorithms or data structure. It was mostly just focus on practical projects and try to get into this industry, try to get some experience. So I basically applied to many jobs. There are a lot of rejections, of course, but most importantly, I was able to lower my expectations because I didn't have any degree. So I don't really have nothing to lose. So I got into a startup at an early startup and try to get some experience from there. Yeah.
Can you tell what did you put in your resume then?
At that time, my resume, I basically put nothing related to tech because I don't have experience about that. I mostly put like some personal training experience, but I don't really see that helpful because a lot of people, they said that this is not really relevant. But I personally feel like that was helpful because as a personal trainer, you have to communicate with the clients. Communication is like really big part. And also for personal trainer, you also have to, same thing as us, engineers as well, like, you guys we always have goals, right? Like, for example, for personal trainers, we have sales goals that we have to meet every quarter or every so and so. For engineering, same thing. We guys have like goals for what kind of features, what kind of products that we have to build. So those are a lot of behavioral stuff. I think I can super relate to that. But in terms of other things that I put on my resume, for example, like I mentioned, personal projects, usually at that time, I just build a project, put it on my GitHub, and then add that link onto my resume. And I would say those are the things that I put initially on my resume. But it was really a trial and error, and I basically applied a lot of jobs, and I realized that there are some things that are missing in my resume, and I talked to a lot of people, and then I basically was able to fix them as I go. So yeah.
Can you tell a little bit more what was missing in your resume? And then let's talk about your personal projects that you put it in your resume as well.
Yeah, definitely. I would say there's a couple of things that I missed at the early stage. One thing I would say is about like, just try to stand in recruiter's shoe. I think that by talking to a lot of recruiters, they will ask you a lot of questions, and then you realize that, okay, some questions I feel like I should add them on my resume for sure, just to get some attentions from recruiters. So at that time, I think a couple of things that I missed was, the skills, a list of skills that you're good at. For example, if you're good at, like, for example, React, right? If you're good at JavaScript or C# or whatever, then you should definitely list them out on the resume. And the other part is to list out all the online presence that you have online, for example, like LinkedIn. At that time, I didn't really have a YouTube channel, but later I realized that, it's better to have a YouTube channel because people, like a recruiter, sometimes they don't have the time to like look at your code or clone your repo and be able to run it locally. So it's very important to maybe have like a video demo about the projects that you build. I think that's also very nice about that as well. Yeah,
I think about your YouTube channel, I'll ask you later because this is also an interesting part. But in terms of your personal project, can you tell me like how did you start with the personal project? What did you choose to start with, and why?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think at that time, I just basically choose projects that are simple because I didn't really have too much time wanted to, invest in, right? Because at that time, I just really want to build a project, apply to a job, and then get some experience and then go from there. So at that time, the first project that I built, it was really just a simple CRUD operation or simple CRUD app or app where, you have a create, read, update, delete. And basically it's like kind of like I remember correctly, it was just similar to an app like LinkedIn where people can be able to post their profile. For example, the app was called Find Personal Trainers, I think. And basically I have list of profiles out there. And then for each profile is linked to a personal trainer's profile. And basically on each profile, personal trainer can put on their like testimonial or like work experience and so on and so forth. I really didn't add too much stuff into it. It was really a simple application to see the skills that I use, for example, using React, Redux, Node.js, Express, MongoDB. Those are some simple stuff. But later I realized that, as a company, if you want to stand out, I think you really need to build projects that are productionally, right? That are similar or mimicking production applications. So if you look at my YouTube channel, I have a section on the top called personal projects. And those two projects I built really similar to a production application where I was using command query segregation and mediator pattern, a lot of clean code architecture. So a lot of things that production application will use. But of course, there's also like other things, but I didn't really cover too much. I basically trying to focus on, hey, I was able to use this design pattern in my project. I was able to refactor this part of the code in my project, or I was able to handle this. I was able to handle that. Like it really mimics a production application. And I think that really got a lot of attention from, other companies when I apply. Yeah. But also I think another thing important is like, as your complexity of your personal project increase, you should also spend some time like learning about it, because sometimes at the early time, I was looking at some things, but I didn't really know too deep. And in the interview, they asked me a question about the project, about a specific part, and I wasn't able to understand. So that I think really something that's good to know as well. Yeah.
By the way, about your YouTube channel, did you start your YouTube channel when you also start learning, or that was a little bit later on your career path?
Yeah, I would say a little later, because the YouTube channel, I actually started it in 2020. So I start applying my first job was like in 2019. So like I mentioned earlier, it was all just try and error. Every time when I encounter something, I feel like this is something that I could improve, then this is something that I take action on. Yeah. It's kind of similar to like how real world teams have like a Scrum methodology where they have like 2-week sprint. Beginning of the sprint, they have a sprint planning, and then at the end of the sprint, they have like a sprint retro where it's conclude about what happened in this 2 weeks. What are some some action items? What are some things that we can improve on? Like something just to reflect. I do that even when I study as well. I think every 2 weeks I study, I reflect. What are some things that we can do? Is the current thing that I'm learning valuable, right? And I also, one thing that I want to talk about is always have question about learning. I always say that's the critical think when I drop out of school, because every time when I go to classes, if my purpose is not really defined about why I'm learning this, like what kind of impact can I get, I think that really questioned me, right? So I really want to take time to reflect, to understand the why a bit more, be able to further develop myself. Yeah.
You actually brought really good thing. Exactly, like I think know how to learn things is very critical, right? Especially in software engineering, when a lot of things are changing and technologies are changing every time. So technically, you need to know like what are you learning, why you're learning this, and what will be your outcome. Is it what you are talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people, because there are a lot of resources out there. Like if you look at Free Code Camp, there's like a lot of videos out there. And of course, I don't think software developers need to know all of them, because sometimes what I found is like, hey, I learned something, but it's not really practical. Like I won't be able to use it in like a real world situation. Then there's no point for learning, right? Because if you learn that, it'll be really demotivating. I found that, because you don't know why you're learning this. But if you know that there's a problem and this problem requires you to learn this, then if you learn it, it's more motivating, right? Because you're trying to solve a problem with learning this. So I think have a reason, have a clear goal about why you're learning this. I think that's, again, yeah, very super, super important. Yeah.
All right. So before moving to the next question, if you would start over again, what would be your steps to learn software engineering and start applying? What would you give the advice to yourself back then?
I think, to be honest, this is a great question. I actually did consider this many times, and I won't really say I have to do anything different, because, to be honest, for me at that time, I do want to see, because later in my career, I actually focus a lot learning about algorithm data structure, but I won't really tell myself to learn algorithm data structure first, because I really want to see, what kind of things can I build with programming, with technology. And I think even another YouTuber, I think it was called like Kevin, not Junior or something. He even mentioned that he used to work at Amazon and then currently working at Google. And he even mentioned that, having this experience of like working or learning something that can build a project, right, rather than just learning about algorithm data structure, is super helpful. I think, yeah, I won't really change. I won't really go anything different. I will still focus on building practical project. What can you do with programming? Is it something that you like? And then go in depth into, okay, learning about, for example, system design, or, algorithm data structures and design patterns, refactorings, and those detailed stuff, right? And I think same thing with anything else, right? If you're, for example, like an artist, right, then you won't be able to go too deep into learning about how to do like Adobe Premiere, or how do you do like Photoshop or anything. You will start by doing something like using Canva to design something that you like, right? And then get a feeling about, okay, is this something that you like about? I think I won't really change anything because at that time I really have no experience, because in 2018, 2019, what you tell me what is computer science, and I can tell you the computer science is probably for people who go fix computers. So I just have nothing about computer science, because I took no courses in high school about what computer science is. And the only computer related courses in high school was really just like, teaching you about doing Excel or Word or PowerPoint and stuff. So yeah.
What courses you would recommend for complete beginners to start with?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I do want to talk about like the platform. Because courses, instructors, they're great, but I do want to talk about the platforms that I use initially. At that time, I mostly use heavily on Udemy and less on YouTube. And the reason is because for Udemy, the courses, they are pretty cheap, right? Like, for example, $12 at that time, I think, for one course. But the thing that I really like about Udemy is that each videos actually has a slide, has like a comment section where if you have comments, if you have a problem, usually there is even like instructor helper that actually answers those questions for the students. And you can even look at the comments on there. And for the comments, unlike YouTube, you can actually post a image or a video, I think, on each comment. So it's really relatable. If you have a problem, for example, maybe an environment issue or whatever it is, you can actually see that. But the reason why I use YouTube less, because for YouTube, some videos, they don't really have comments, or some videos, the comments is not available, is disabled. So it's really hard for, people who are learning this to follow along, in my opinion. So I really like using the platform Udemy. And of course, for some instructors, I follow initially, especially for web development, I mostly follow Brad Travis, even though, his course at that time, it was really easy to understand. It was like, if you know nothing about coding, if you don't want to spend too much time, I think his course at that time was like about 10 hours or so. You learning about React, learning about Node.js, learning about like something like that. Building a simple project, get your hand dirty I think his teaching style is really easy to explain. He doesn't really go too deep into detailed terminologies that you have to know. At that time, I really to be honest, the reason why I say this, because at that time, I purchased a lot of courses on Udemy, and I also returned a lot of courses on Udemy. And other course instructors, I also follow on Udemy. I think it was Mosh, his last name, I forgot, but his courses on Udemy, something about learning C# algorithms, the basics about .NET and all that kind of things. Really high quality videos. But the things that his video sometimes could go too deep into a specific area. So those are something that I really like about. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. We'll put it in Eric recommended course section in our description below. Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Eric, so let's talk about, you completed courses, you completed your resume, you was working on your personal project and you start applying, right? How long it took you to get your first job when you start applying?
So very first job, like I mentioned, it was really in a startup. So basically what happened at that time was I learned about, self-taught for like, I think it was 3 or 4 months initially. And I started to apply to many jobs that I could find either on Indeed or networking on LinkedIn. Every day I spend 2 hours every single day, just go to random people on LinkedIn, just try to network with. And I applied to many big tech companies, like mid-sized companies, maybe a lot of like local companies or startup companies. A startup, to be honest, it was kind of like my last line of defense, where, if those companies say no to me, then I probably just stick to a company that can get experience. And I find that startup companies requirement tend to be sometimes it tend to be a lot lower compared to, large tech companies. So I think getting into a startup, try to get some experience is really, really important if you have like no experience, no interns, no work experience related to tech. So the time frame I would say is, like I mentioned before, like it's just 1 month. I apply to many places. Like at that 1 month, I just go full into applying, nothing about just learning. It was just all about applying. And during that time, there are a lot of assessments that are given to me, a lot of, some assessments that are really hard, some assessments that are related to algorithm data structure, which I have no idea about. And some assessments are just super, super long as well. And I remember there was one time I do an assessment, I almost feel like I was getting a scammed or something because the assessment was like really, really long. And I don't even know if this is something that's for me, but definitely took me around 1 month or so. Yeah.
1 month. Wow. It's pretty quick actually, but how many interviews did you fail before you got your first job?
Interviews that I failed, I will say definitely over a lot, because not compared to how many apply, because there are a lot of times where I apply to, for example, 100. I'm just giving you an example. Maybe 5 or 4 of them will be able to get back to me, and because they look at my resume, it's not really that good. And then maybe during that 4 or 5 people reach out to me, maybe a few of them maybe ask me like, well, did you have any like education, like do you have like a transcript about college or whatever? Some of them, they ask me a question like, okay, let's give you an interview. They bring me on site, and interviews really vary because because, you know, unlike big tech companies interviews more well known because, you know, this is what it looks like, and every big companies they does that. But for medium sized company, it's so varied. They might just completely ask you a bunch of system design kind of questions or behavior questions, and they really test to see different things, and it's really hard to prepare all of them right all in once. So, and I actually realized that as well. Yeah.
So how many?
So yeah, like I mentioned, like give it the ratio, like 100, if I apply to 100 jobs, I get like, you know, for example, 4 or 5 people reach back to me. And then maybe like none of them succeed, or maybe one of them succeed. But the thing is that I also apply to a lot of startup jobs as well. Startup jobs, they're, like I mentioned, the requirements start to be lower. So I find that to be a lot easier to, you know, get into. So like I mentioned earlier, startups, they're easy to get into, but it's also kind of like my last line of defense. So, you know, other than the startups, like those, you know, medium-sized companies, I would say all of them got rejected.